going to go ahead and get started, folks.
Oh, okay.
We are live.
In fact, I think he may be in Marcella's office.
Oh.
So good afternoon and welcome to the Administration, Finance, Recreation, and Parks, Public Safety, and Public Works Committee meeting for January 14, 2020. The purpose of the committee meetings over the city departments is to pass along information to the city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of the city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance mandates the city administrator as the chair of the committee meetings. By ordinance, the committee makes no formal decisions on committee matters. Rather, items are voted to move to a mayor and council meeting for consideration and vote, or staff receives guidance from the committee regarding a matter. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during the committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings held at 7 p.m. in the city council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Administration, Finance, Recreation, and Parks Committee meeting for December 10th, 2019. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Tizer, second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Unanimous. We're going to move to item number 8 under other items. Litchfield Gates in the public right-of-way, and this is a continuing discussion from our December 10th committee meeting. And I'm going to ask Ms. Bromberg to frame the issue for us all, and then I'll turn it over to our legal department for our analysis. Ms. Bromberg.
Thank you.
Can we table this until council members?
So this item is to discuss some gates that were installed by a private developer, Lennar, in a subdivision Grand Reserve at Litchfield. Grand Reserve at Litchfield is a single-family subdivision that was platted in multiple phases, and by that I mean the final plat of the city recognizing and accepting the public infrastructure was done in phases. Phase 1B, which is the section that connects the Grand Reserve development to the Litchfield 100 development, was accepted by the city with a final plat that was signed and recorded in November of 2016. About, I would say, in this next 6 months following that, the developer installed one gate initially to try and prohibit construction traffic from leaving the development they were working in and cutting through to the Litchfield 100 as a result of some of the concerns that were raised by residents in the Litchfield 100 area. That was a gate that was installed by the developer, maintained by the developer, and was not required at the time by the city to be removed. Within probably a year or so later, a second gate was installed by the same developer at another location within the subdivision. Both of those gates were evidently opened by the developer last week without giving us the advance notice that we had asked for, so that we could finish making sure that we were able to notify all the parties that had been involved between our conversations with City Council, the HOA, et cetera. I believe at this point all of the construction signs that Transportation had wanted to install prior to them being opened have been installed. Anything else you'd like me to add?
Thank you, Ms. Bromberg. I would like to ask our legal department or legal office to give an analysis, and then I'll open the floor for discussion.
I'm Bob Halsey, the Assistant City Attorney. The City Attorney, David Davidson, has prepared a memorandum to Mayor and Council, and I'm going to read that. Dear Mayor and Council, per my 2005 memorandum to then Mayor Jerry Wood, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein, the city may not permit any person to install a gate across a public road. OCGA, that's Official Code of Georgia Annotated, Section 36-30-10, and cases involving the law provide that a municipal corporation may not grant to any person the right to erect and maintain a structure or obstruction in a public street. Any attempt to authorize or to instruct staff to authorize the maintenance of a gate across the public street is ultra vires or beyond the city's authority and could lead to city liability, personal liability for council members, and may be a violation of a council member's oath of office. In December 2019, committee instructed staff to investigate how to allow a gate across a public road or possible alternatives to alleviate concerns with speeding, construction traffic, and gunfire. Police, fire, transportation, community development, legal, and the city administrator's office have met on the matter and determined the following. The gate may only remain if the road is private and the road and gate are maintained privately. Grand Reserve at Lickfield is required to have 2 entrances and exits by International Fire Code because there are over 30 homes in this subdivision. If the owners and developers within the Grand Reserve wish to privatize their roads, they could petition the city to abandon the roads, and then they could gate both entrances. Public roads may not be gated. Therefore, upon request by the developer and enough homeowners within Grand Reserve at Lickfield, it is possible for the city to abandon the roads within Grand Reserve, and the subdivision could gate its entrances. There also is a possibility that Lickfield 100 could petition the city to make Bishop's Court and Cashier's Way private. However, this would require study and a determination that those roads serve no substantial public purpose. The HOA is considering making this request. Until the city receives a petition from the Lickfield 100 HOA or the developer and owners within the Grand Reserve at Lickfield, the gate is a nuisance under state law and may subject the city to legal jeopardy. Lickfield 100 owners have brought up other subdivisions that have gates across public drives, including Brookfield and Kingswood. The Brookfield Emergency Access Area from Cox Road is simply a public access drive for fire service and was designed as such. It does not meet the standards for a public road and was only intended on the plat for fire and utility access. The Kingswood Gate, as noted on the plat, is to be removed at such time as Kent Road is paved. However, may still be found to be in violation of state law and requires more research. Staff has determined that a study of traffic patterns and counts after the gate is removed is required to determine if an actual problem exists with the public road connection between the Grand Reserve at Lickfield and Lickfield 100 subdivisions. The gate that crosses the public road at the current location is a hazard to the public and to the neighbors because it delays public safety response times and could create confusion for the traveling public. Should the research show that speeding or illegal activity increases due to the public road connection, law enforcement efforts may need to be increased in the area to deter speeding or other illegal activities the neighbors have mentioned. Finally, if an analysis of conditions after the gate is removed and shows a large influx of traffic or a new speeding problem due to the public road connection, the Lickfield 100 HOA could apply for assistance under the traffic calming program or the residential traffic control enhancement policy of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Halsey. The floor is open for discussion.
Thanks. I have a question. For a road could be used only for bike and pedestrian. Is this considered public road?
Because the road is already a public road, in order to restrict it to bike and pedestrian, the city would have to abandon it and then designate it as such.
What is the state definition for public road?
It's already been dedicated as a public road, open to the traveling public, all vehicular traffic.
So on that note, there was discussion that I had brought forward to a committee meeting probably about a year or two ago on having a discussion of potentially closing down Canton Street on weekends to create a more pedestrian area, et cetera. And in fact, we do that, of course, on a limited basis for certain events. Help me understand why closing down Canton Street to vehicular traffic would be different to closing down here for vehicular traffic.
Temporary closures are allowed. That's not a permanent closure of a road, so the public still has the ability to use that road, just not on particular days.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like what you're saying is you feel the city does, your opinion is the city does have the authority to block this street off to vehicular traffic on temporary basis, not on a permanent basis. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So what would be the process to make it available only for pedestrian and bike? Can you detail the process to follow? And reference any state law or any more specific legislation on that?
I don't have the specific statute in front of me, but we have used it with other subdivisions who have asked that roads be abandoned. If anyone wishes to apply, I can find that. But there's a specific state law that says this is how you go out about abandoning it. They petition mayor and council. The staff determines whether or not staff thinks that there is a substantial public interest. If staff finds there's not a substantial public interest in the roads, then it comes to mayor and council for a vote, and a road can be abandoned. But that's the process that is followed. So someone has to petition mayor and council.
So at the last committee meeting we had in December, there was discussion that staff was going to communicate with the HOA and/or affected parties. Has there been discussion and/or interest in having the city abandon this right-of-way?
I did have a conversation with a contact at Lennar. I did not make a request that they consider it. What I did instead was pass on the information that Mayor Henry had brought up, has the developer, had a conversation with the developer. I pointed him to the committee meeting and said the question was asked, would the developer consider in the Grand Reserve development at Litchfield to be private? The response that I received was that would require Lennar, the HOA that Lennar has set up, which I'm sure would have some sort of a separate vote in that each of the homeowners who currently live in Grand Reserve at Litchfield and David Weekly Homes, who has been purchasing the lots to build, would have to be a part of that communication to make a decision together as a group in order to make that petition. There was no indication of whether there was interest or not. It didn't sound like it was positive, but there wasn't necessarily an answer that was given to me. And that was mostly because of David Weekly Homes being involved, and whether or not they would be interested in it or not. I don't know about the homeowners. Of course, they haven't been involved in the conversation. I have had meetings with two representatives in the past few weeks from the Litchfield 100 HOA. It is my understanding they're collecting information in order to see whether or not that is a viable option for them to petition, to request for some sections of their roadways to be converted from public to private. And we're working on getting the numbers for them from a maintenance perspective, lighting, stormwater, roadway, of the cost that they would have to incur for taking over the ownership of those roadways and the items within the right-of-way.
So I understand, so first off, when you say lighting, is it that there's street lights that
Yes,
the
sir.
city currently pays for that their HOA or whoever else wants to be included as well would need to pay?
That's correct.
And then, so you mentioned, so maintenance, that's if they were to make it private, if they choose to repave it in the future.
Correct.
What was the storm?
So there is existing stormwater structures, inlets, pipes, et cetera. If the roadway, it's not just the road that's abandoned, it's the right-of-way that's abandoned, which means everything within the right-of-way that the city currently maintains would then become privately maintained. So there's stormwater structures, pipes that connect those. There's a culvert for a stream crossing that is included in that area. Again, it depends on the length of roadways that are asked to be converted. There's also signage. There's probably a minor amount of striping, maybe a stop bar here or there. The street lights, as you mentioned, and then the pavement structure, curb and gutter itself would be included in that. All the other utilities, power, water, those sort of things, those are responsibility of the owners of those utilities and not something that they would be incurring any cost on.
Is there a possibility if the Litchfield 100 acquired some property at where the gate existed and did a hammerhead on that, and for the other development to just have the one entrance coming in and to have a gate there?
Hopefully I have this right. I'm sure the fire marshal will come and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not believe that would work. The hammerhead is not the issue, it's not a turnaround problem, it's an access issue. So for Grand Reserve at Litchfield, as a newer development that was developed in the city of Roswell using the codes that applied at the time, they're required to have 2 separate and distinct access roads, access points in and out of their development. So for a hammerhead to be installed, it removes that second entrance into the Grand Reserve at Litchfield. Litchfield 100 has multiple ones because of the multiple accesses off of Lackey, Cox, et cetera. And so the hammerhead would not necessarily remove the number of entrances that they need. It takes away the entrance that Grand Reserve at Litchfield would need.
I just have one more question on that. So you referenced the new codes that governed the new subdivision. What are those new codes that governed the 30 homes and the 1 entrance?
So specific to the fire access, that's the International Fire Code. And at the time of the Grand Reserve at Litchfield development, I'm not exactly sure what year that would have been. The code, I think it's 2012 code that would have been followed, but it gets readopted every year, so I don't remember exactly which number. We're currently using 2018 code, but it's 2020, so it could be a little bit confusing. The Litchfield 100 development was developed over a period of time by Fulton County. They would have been subject to the same codes. I don't know at the time of the phasing of that what the exact language was that was in there as far as the number of entrances, but that language has been in the code at least since 2006, 2007, because we have a review that was done for a future phase of Litchfield 100 that was never developed, that was reviewed by the city, processed through the city, and the 2 entrances was required for them at that time as well. So I know at least since the last phase of the Litchfield 100 development going in, the code has been the same.
Is there anything in the IFRS, the International Fire Code, that gives an exemption? Are there opportunities in that? There's some language in there perhaps that allow for a temporary gate or a fire gate?
Is an exception. Is this on? Yes. There is an exception for the secondary access for more than 30 homes. To it. Where there are more than 30 dwelling units on a single public or private fire apparatus access road, all dwelling units are equipped throughout with an approved automatic sprinkler system in accordance with section 903.3. So all of the houses would have to be sprinkled, which at this point is not very practical.
The 30 homes in the new neighborhood would have to be sprinklered?
All of the homes in the new neighborhood would have to be sprinkled in order to not have a secondary exit.
A question, so if there were a secondary exit at Grand Reserve at Litchfield, does that provide an opportunity? Does that change the public road issue with the gate?
I don't
I
understand
don't
your
think so.
question.
Well, I guess I'm looking at a map, and I'm looking at possible ways for Grand Reserve to have a second entrance onto Lackey Road, which is that a possibility that's been looked at? And if that were possible, does that, how does that play into the gate and the public road issue?
So for a second gate, it has to be considered remote. And remote would be half the diagonal distance of the overall property from one to the other. I don't know if it would meet, if a second entrance would meet that requirement.
So it would depend on the location, actually, of the second entrance. Okay, all right, thank
There was
you.
also at one point a second entrance planned for, I think, Old Chadwick Road at some point, but they're not remote enough away from each other to be considered separate entrances or exits.
That makes sense.
I was out there this afternoon again, checking it out, and I know that if we get down in the situation and the gates do have to remain open, I guess this is probably a Mohammed question. A lot of the worry is on the apps that could redirect cars through the neighborhood. I know that apps take into consideration a lot of different metrics, be it speed limits, no left turn signs, no through traffic signs. I did notice a lot of no outlet signs throughout the neighborhood because a lot of cul-de-sacs. Is there what kind of signage would be placed throughout the neighborhood to help with the issue of possible reroutement of traffic?
So all the necessary required signage is already in place. We do not restrict any public from using any public road. We could talk to the app companies like Waze. I'm not sure how that experience is going to go, but we could try. But to just to explain, in general, we are studying the city roads all year round, every year. So just to give you an idea on the extent of the problem it could ever possibly be. So if you want to imagine the intersection of State Road 140, which is Arnold Mill, and Cox Road, that's the intersection where the possible reroute could occur from. So we have looked, that's not a City of Roswell intersection, by the way, that is in the City of Milton, but we do have the traffic numbers there because it's so close to our city boundary. So the peak hour, AM and PM peak hour numbers are about a little over 300 cars that are either turning right from House Road, Arnold Mill Road 140 onto Cox in the morning peak, and in the afternoon peak go in the reverse direction, go on Cox eastbound, making a left onto Arnold Mill to go north. So that so the maximum peak number is about a little over 300 cars. So that's the extent of the problem it could ever be. So if there was a water main break or a big issue or road closure for some reason, so that's the maximum number of cars that could reroute. And they have another option. There's an existing option to avoid that intersection, which is Lackey. It's a dirt road. So that's a deterrent, huh?
Plum Crow. Lackey? Oh, okay.
It's
Sorry, I get them mixed
Lackey,
up.
and it changes
Sorry.
name, so maybe at some point
Okay.
it is Plum Crow. I don't know. So that option is available today. I don't think a lot of people are using it because it's so painful to reroute. And the same thing actually is going to happen if Waze or any of those apps are going to send people to this route that we're talking about. It's just that with the 25 miles an hour speed and a few stop signs and a few sharp turns and a few curves, and then of course with the enforcement from PD, yeah, I don't think it makes a good shortcut for anyone to go there. But like I said, it is possible. It is a public road. A few cars are going to try it every now and then, and we'll have to study the impact. And those are the conversations we've had with the HOA, that we would want to study the extent of the problem to suggest solutions.
Okay. Just, after receiving the document from City Legal, I just started reaching out to some different folks regarding that process, looking outside the box at some solutions. And there's a councilman in a fellow city who is actually in contact with Waze working on solutions such as this within the cities with their traffic departments. So it's something we can look into. And
Most
love to put you
definitely.
in touch
We
with
have
office.
tried it once. I don't want to go into the details, but of course they listen, but they'll have to, again, they'll have to see what the impact of the problem is for them to take any significant measures. If we're talking rerouting 10 cars, they may not show a lot of interest.
Okay.
But
Just
we will
wanted to
definitely try. That's one thing on our list.
bring up an option. Thank you.
So my question is to legal. Could you give us the definition of the state of Georgia for public roads and public streets?
Any roadway to be used by the general public?
Okay, so pedestrian is general public?
Yes, but it's
Okay,
for,
and bicycle is general public?
but it has to also allow all vehicular traffic.
So they say all vehicle or traffic?
Yes.
State law? And
Yes.
can you refer which?
No, I can't,
Okay.
but I know that's the law.
Any additional questions or comments? I think staff's recommendation is that we continue. I'm sorry, Mr. Palermo.
I think, well, actually, first, so help me understand what's staff's recommendation to continue.
Here, Mike.
I just want to understand that first.
To continue working with the HOA to come up with solutions, but the gate's got to come out while we study the issue.
And so it's my understanding, and help me understand if this was not the case, but some of the residents in the neighborhood had told me that there was a direction given from City Hall, that someone at City Hall had called the owners of the gate, telling them that they are breaking the law and required to move the gate. Is that accurate?
As far as I know, it's not accurate. I
It's not
haven't
accurate.
talked to anybody. I don't know anybody on the city staff that's talked to anybody. As far as I know, the gates were open and we weren't aware of it.
I did speak with Lennar. There's also an email dated December 6th, another one from later in December, that quotes the fact that the gates are a violation of state law. Originally, we asked for some other things regarding the land disturbance permit to be addressed before they opened the gates. We later revised that. I actually had a phone conversation with them, told them I was not directing them to remove the gates, but that we were required to let them know that, according to our attorneys and based on all the information we provided, that the gates were a violation of state law and that they needed to decide what they were going to be doing. The email did request that they notify us before the gates were open, because we wanted to make sure that transportation was able to implement the signage package that they had come up with before the gates were open, but they did not notify us. My notification that the gates were open was that I got an email from a resident. And then we happened to be out there later the same day to verify it. We have inspectors that are out there on a weekly basis who had not been told they were going to be opened, and I had not been notified, even though I spoke to them and emailed and asked them to let me know before they did, so that we could be ready and make sure we informed everybody.
So, as I mentioned when I found out about this risk and requested this come to the December committee, I have major concerns with this, and again, I don't just see this as affecting the Litchfield neighborhoods. I see this as a risk that's citywide that I absolutely think we need to focus on. I'm very concerned that if we roll over on this one, then we're just setting ourselves up for more risks with other neighborhoods throughout the city. And so basically, I do appreciate and want to make sure staff is continuing to work with the HOAs, and it sounds like there is some information gathering and potentially some progress. I think that's a good sign. At the same time, I'm concerned it's not enough. So basically, the advice that we're getting from council is basically documenting that they feel is beyond the city's legal authority and could lead to city liability and personal liability. So that's the guidance that city legal has intentionally put in writing. And At the same time, so basically the way I hear that is it sounds to me like doing what's right is creating this liability. And so what I want to discuss and I want to raise to make sure that we truly are looking at all angles is I'm very appreciative for our fantastic legal office. So we have with both Bob and David, we get a wealth of knowledge on many different topics. So what I've learned over the last 4 years is there's so many potential items that could come up that are of a legal nature, and they provide great information for so many different aspects. At the same time, I think this is absolutely critical. And I guess what I'm still having trouble understanding and trouble believing is I don't follow what's going on at the Gold Dome very closely. So I don't follow the exact state laws and details, but I find it hard to believe that there would be a state law that would be intentionally negatively impacting a community and negatively impacting these residents, these taxpayers that have lived peacefully and safely for so long. So what I want to look at and what I'd feel more comfortable with and I want to raise for this body is the potential of having our legal group work with city council and bring in outside counsel that would potentially specialize in something like this. Because again, I think we so often get great legal guidance, and at the same time, this is a very detailed area. As I've mentioned, I think it's critical because again, I'm not just looking at this as one neighborhood. I see one large neighborhood that's extremely negatively impacted, and at the same time, I see this as creating risks over our whole city. So I want to make sure we're absolutely doing everything in our power to really make sure that we're fighting for the residents and we're coming up with the best solution possible. I know that one case law that I saw, it was my interpretation that what it was outlawing was someone personally using it. So if I were to put my truck in the middle of the street and just start saying you can't go through because I need my truck there, that would be illegal, and that of course makes perfect sense. But I want to make sure that we're exploring every possible option, and I'd feel more comfortable if we had the opportunity to work with outside counsel. Because again, I want to do what's right, and at the same time, I see that it was documented that could lead to the city liability or personnel liability. Well, in that case, let's bring in the outside counsel to make sure that we absolutely are attacking this problem and really fighting for the residents for their safety. I'd love to hear from the body on your thoughts and any concerns or different viewpoints.
May I clarify?
Please.
I mean, we're open to special counsel for any reason, but you want us to have special counsel interpret this law. Without express legislative authority, a municipal corporation may not grant to any person the right to erect or maintain a structure or obstruction in a public street. That's the entire law.
So what I think I'm here. So I appreciate you rereading that. Again, the way I'm hearing it and the way that I saw when there was another detail of case law around that, to any person, if there's any single person in this audience that wants to, for their own personal reason, block off a street and use that street privately without it being a private road, I think that's absolutely illegal, and I completely understand we would absolutely need to stop that.
You're aware that a corporation is legally a person. I mean, that's what a person refers to. A natural person or a corporation. So those are the entities that says state law says you can't do it.
Well, then and that's where I see another contradiction on the sense that we do have the ability to privatize a road. That's something that we have the legal authority to do, and it's something that I think could be a great solution, and I want to see us work towards that solution. But we do have the ability to block off public roads because we just decide that they're no longer public. But I just feel like I'd love to see as fast as possible staff continues to work with the HOA and finds a solution, but I really want to understand, does this body feel that we're absolutely doing everything we can possibly do to make sure that we're fighting to protect the safety and welfare of our residents?
I have a question. Is a government considered a person or a corporation?
A municipal corporation is created by the state, so the city is a municipal corporation, which is a body of the state.
Thank you.
So this question is for legal again. Do you know the definition of vehicles according with the state of Georgia?
Not right off my head, but a vehicle, my understanding of nearly 40 years of the law of vehicle is anything that a natural person can propel or has motor fuels that travels along a roadway. That's a vehicle.
So is a bicycle a vehicle?
Yes,
Is a golf cart a vehicle?
yes,
Okay, so if it's open for golf cart, bicycles, this means that it's open for vehicles.
it has to be open to all vehicles.
All vehicles.
All vehicles except those, the State Department of Transportation has, I think, Title 40 of the OCGA is about that thick, and it has definitions of various types of vehicles, and the state can say where those vehicles can go and not go, but that's the state's prerogative. What this law says is without the state telling us that we can do it, we can't block to vehicular traffic. Now, you know, I've heard here about various things, and the solution is go to the state and have the state representatives enact a law or something that you think should be done, because it's a matter of authority. The state has general authority, and it only grants certain authority to municipal corporations. It doesn't grant all authority. We have certain home rule things we can do. We have certain taxes we can enact. We can't just willy-nilly enact any tax we want to. We have to only do what the state allows us to do. So counties are given certain powers and cities are given certain powers. That's part of the federal system. So I would say go to the state representative, the state senators, and say, we'd like to see a change in the law.
Unless there are additional questions or comments, what we can do is, again, we'll continue to work with the HOA and trying to help them with the solutions. That's really about all we can do at this point.
So I just want to remind this body, please reach out to me at any time if you do support hiring special counsel on this, because Mr. Halsey, as he brought up, you know, just, it, again, you know, I'm an optimist, so it really just shocks and disappoints me that that with the state taking away so many, you know, rights and opportunities from cities, and more importantly to actually the residents it affects. This is something that it makes me wonder with special counsel, is there the opportunity to bring more visibility to the issues with this, to potentially get more legislative visibility on this? Because in reality, with all the different things that they do down there, I'm concerned that fighting for residents' rights and cities' rights is not going to be a priority. But if we are able to really expose a lot of the issues with this law and really dig in, I just think that's an opportunity, again, not just for Litchfield, but for all neighborhoods that could be at risk within Roswell.
Is there any instances that this has been allowed or happened in the city of Roswell or other communities around here?
I'll defer to the folks that have more history here than I do.
Currently in the city of Roswell, the only two locations that I'm aware of where there is a public property that has a gate across it, one is Brookfield West, that is referred to in the handout that was provided. That is right-of-way that was dedicated to the city in case the road was ever connected through, and it was required to stay basically in the state that it's in until such time that the subdivision wanted to extend it. At the time, and I don't remember the exact year, at the new fire station that was built on Cox Road, The city built at their own expense, a one-lane driveway that is specifically and only used for fire access because that is the entrance from the fire station into Brookfield West in order to provide timely response times. And so that is a public property, but it is not a public road. It's not built to public road standards. It's not built to allow for multiple lane traffic, et cetera. The second one is located over off of Eatrice Road at Kent. It's the name of the subdivision is Kingswood. This is the one that it was indicated some more research was required. There was a settlement associated with the rezoning associated with the Kingswood development. One of the requirements included in that settlement was for the subdivision to have a second connection to Kent Road. That was not a fire required. I just want to make sure that's clear. There's only 27 homes in that subdivision. So at the time, fire did not require a second entrance or access point onto a separate road. I believe it was associated with transportation and connectivity, but I'd have to do some research to find out why the request was made to make the connection. But as a part of the settlement, it was that the road would be connected to Kent Road, but that there would be a fire gate across it for fire only to be able to come through there. That's the reason why that in the memo read by Mr. Holsey, it indicates more research may need to be done because we don't know if that was something that council actually could have legally have accepted at the time based on the research we're currently doing right now. So those are the only two that I'm personally aware of. I don't know if anybody else on staff can refer to any others in a situation where we have had gates across a public road.
So I want to go back to the example I brought up earlier, actually. So it's what I'm hearing from Mr. Halsey is we do not have the authority to do a permanent closure there. But as discussed, as I brought forward to committee about a year or two ago, with my interest to close off Canton Street on weekends, what I'd like to actually discuss is doing a temporary closure similar to that, where could we close this street off on weekdays? So it's closed off to vehicular traffic on weekdays, and it's open to vehicular traffic on weekends. And that way, on weekdays, residents citywide have the opportunity to ride their bicycle, their golf cart, jog, etc. And then again, we'll not be doing a permanent closure because on weekends it would be open to vehicular traffic.
I keep account the same. So I'm not a lawyer, I'm a businessman, but I just Googled here something called Georgia Code, Title 32, Highways, Bridges, and Ferries, Chapter 1, General Provisions, 3 Definitions, OCGA 3213, 2010, and I went to point number 24, Definition of Public Road, means of highway, road, street, avenue, toll road, tollway, drive, detour, or other way of open to the public and intended or used for its enjoyment and for the passage of vehicles, in any county or municipality of Georgia, including but not limited to the following public right, structure, sidewalk, etc. So I read here, intend or use for its enjoyment and for the passage of vehicles. I don't read all vehicles. I just read OF vehicles. So I don't know if this is something that we can use to just allow a few types of vehicles going through a public road. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I just Googled here and I found this information. Which tells me that we need to do more research on this option, dig in more in detail, and see if there's a way to do it. Maybe analyze more details, the meaning of vehicles versus all vehicles, and if something that the law will allow us to open this road for public access for bicycles and golf cars.
Councilmember Zapata, could you please explain to me how you see this option as being helpful for this particular stretch of road? I mean, it would seem to me that if you made it accessible only to bikes and golf carts, then the affected residents would agree that the only way they access their home is by that type of vehicle. So just, I guess, explain to me how you see this solution as working in this.
Well, it's very obvious. No cars, no trucks.
So the
No
people
buses.
So the people who live on this stretch of road park to go
So-
to their.
So it's very simple.
There will be in the future, correct? On that stretch?
I'm saying for the usage of bicycles, pedestrians, and golf cars. And, you have you have like a remote control access for public safety vehicles.
Right, right.
That you have some technology that goes up and down these columns.
Right.
So that will benefit because we won't have any cars, trucks, buses going by. That is the benefit that I see. I don't know if you don't see it,
Right.
that's fine.
As a compromise, why not just explore it? Why not look at potentially doing that for a 1-month period, some temporary amount of period? And I think that creates two opportunities. One is it gives us the opportunity to test out potentially a good solution. And another thing is it creates a safe opportunity of enjoyment while staff is working closely with the HOA for perhaps a long-term solution.
So I guess I'm not clear. So where would you put in this, just for I think, hey, if this is a good idea, this is a good idea. Where would you cut off cars? Because the gates then separate two neighborhoods, correct? So you got cars, you got houses on one side and houses on the other. So how would people get to their houses in cars? But aren't they building homes?
Yes, they are.
So they're not building homes at all.
David Weekly won't even sell the lots.
Which is why I think there's very little risk to even just doing this as a temporary trial period of, a few months, a month, whatever it might be. And if it ends up being a challenge, if houses get built quicker, for any reason, this council can always reconvene and decide to take it down sooner. But what do we lose by trying this for a month or a few months?
My understanding is that the gates are open now, opened by a private entity. The city has no power to tell that private entity to violate state law. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. We can work towards solutions. You can work to change the law. You can work for all of these things, but the gates have to remain open while you do that.
But again, let's go back to the Canton Street example. So I'm active. I've been actively discussing the potential on weekends of closing off a portion, and that's something where it did not move forward because the businesses were not interested at the time, which is fine. I want to make sure we're supporting our businesses. But what I'm looking to do is something on a temporary basis. And what also we're hearing, and the example is, it would still be open to golf carts, to bicycles, to people jogging, but it's just the opportunity that we're temporarily closing off to vehicular traffic.
Transportation staff would have to address the practicality of that, but yeah, you can make a motion to temporarily do it for, I suppose, a month or two on weekends and see if
Weekdays.
there's support, or weekdays, whatever. I think that there's some safety issues with that because you have more children out on the weekends and you have greater chance for things there. I mean, that just comes to mind. So that's up to y'all.
Would it be possible to see on a map exactly the segment that would become pedestrian bike only? Would it be the area between the first gate at Grand Litchfield and the second one on Bishop's Court? that entire segment, or is it a smaller segment that you're referring to?
I'm referring, instead of the gate, you just put 2 piles there that allow going bicycle but no cars. Instead of the gates, you just put
Right.
2 piles, you know, there's many places that they have these in the cities. So then, those can go up and down, if you need to get a public safety vehicle. So instead of the gate, you just put these that allow traffic but no cars.
Councilmember Zapata, are you addressing just one gate or 2 gates? I think Councilmember Wilsey thinks you're talking about both gates. You're talking about just one gate, is
Yes,
that
correct,
correct?
yes.
I think that's,
But does that satisfy, I guess, the public safety requirement you're saying would be satisfied because it's a breakaway? Is that because they can use it even though it's blocked off?
You have, maybe transportation can explain better, but you have in the streets devices
Right.
that with remote control will go up and down the pillars. So when the vehicle need to go, like an emergency vehicle, you press the remote control, this will go down and the vehicle can go through the road. Then you press again and this goes up again, and then only bicycles, pedestrians, and golf cars can go through the road.
Yeah,
Have you seen
I
those?
see transportation is coming forward, so I'd love to hear.
I mean, it's
what
very
you say
common
about
in
it.
Europe where they have some cars that they will park because they live there, but they don't want to make it going through vehicles.
So I haven't seen the remote control bollards is what it's called, but we do have the regular bollards that employees would have to go out, install them, and then take them out. And I would not recommend this temporary weekday versus weekend closure because, that violates the driver's expectancy. If there is drivers, if there is teenage kids, who are driving down there, we don't want to have that road open and closed. When we close it on Canton Street, there is top vehicle with lights on both ends of it. We have our own city trucks, the city transportation trucks with their lights on, and a whole bunch of barriers and stuff. So it's very obvious and very visible that it is closed. On that road, I wouldn't recommend doing the temporary closure and opening.
So I'm confident that if that's the way this body decides to move, that I'm confident staff could provide we see there's the things with the reflectors. So there's the I've seen a number of different options, whether it's barrels, bigger things, reflective signs. I know that staff has the opportunity to create signs with reflectors. So if that's, I see you raising that up as a con, but I see more pros to temporarily closing off the street than the cons that I see.
I did have one more question. Is there a gate at Nesbit Lakes?
No. You talk about Briarstone at Nesbit Lakes and the connection into Nesbit Lakes. There is no gate there. There is not a roadway connection between the back ends of those neighborhoods. The main entrance into to Briarstone at Nesbit is off of Nesbit Ferry Drive. At the time of the development of that property, instead of a full road connection at the back to the back end of Nesbit Ferry, a single lane access drive, I believe is what it's referred to, was built. It honestly is a glorified pedestrian path. It is not I'm not even sure it's built to the same standard as the fire lane that I referred to earlier. I'm not exactly sure, but it does not have a gate on it. It looks like a wide asphalt sidewalk. Not public right away. It's HOA. And just to clarify, that is actually, I'm pretty sure, on private HOA property, where that connection is that I'm referring to. No, sir, I'm talking about Nesbit Ferry development on the other side of the city.
It's my understanding that some conversations are ongoing with the HOAs and the developers currently, so I would suggest at this point if we could just let those conversations continue and discuss at a later date.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
So there's a motion on the floor, if you don't mind repeating that.
Okay, I just a motion to continue discussing the various options with the HOAs and the developer.
Thank you. Is
Are
there a
you
second to that motion?
deferring
Yes.
to another committee meeting? Is that your intent?
Well, ideally, a resolution would come from those discussions, and if it does not, I would, we can discuss it again at another committee meeting.
I would not support that motion because I have not heard clear feedback on why one of two things should not occur, either or both. Either we look at hiring special counsel to really help work through all these details that has pure expertise based on this exact topic and helps find a solution, potentially expedites the solution, or we temporarily do a street closure on weekdays, and I'd even be supportive of just trying that temporary street closure for a month to see if it's used, residents are enjoying it, having that pedestrian opportunity there. So from what I've heard from Mr. Halsey, that is a possibility because we don't have the ability to permit, but just as we had discussed for Canton Street, we do temporarily. So those are two options that I would like to discuss and depending on the discussion, potentially support, but I'm not able to support just not doing anything and just deferring it.
So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Is that your motion?
I can't, there's somebody else's motion.
Sorry.
Motion is to continue discussing options with the HOA. Staff would continue working with the HOA on this issue. Motion dies for lack of a second. Is there an alternate motion?
Before we go on, Mr. Halsey, it's not clear to me. Are there rules around temporarily closing streets? I'm concerned, while I really want to find a solution to this thing, and I think the citizens and residents know that, I'm concerned that we don't get ourselves in a substance over form situation. I'm concerned about the safety issues. I know we go to great lengths when we do a temporary closing. So I don't want to rush into this because we're trying to do something, while sitting here in this room.
Well, it would have to go to council for a formal vote. Committee doesn't have the power to do anything other than recommend that it go. And what would happen is you have to take into consideration the health, safety, and welfare rules and make a determination whether the temporary closure was for the benefit of the general public and furthers the health, safety, and welfare of the general public.
So I guess my question is, would it be likely that we would have to have city vehicles, officers, things there during that time again, I'm looking for, are there, it seems like such a simple solution, but I suspect that there's more to it.
Well, transportation would have to weigh in and fire about what they would need on that to allow access. I know transportation has weighed in when developers over undeveloped property have put up cables across the way to block access. So they would study it and make a recommendation to mayor and council, and mayor and council would decide what safety features needed to be there.
So I have two issues with some of the points being brought up. So one is, from a safety standpoint, talking about the police officers and the police cars, et cetera, that go into being there. We actually didn't always have that level of protection there. I was actually in a meeting with the former police chief the day of the Alive After 5. It was decided to start doing that, and it was because of seeing a tragedy that occurred in another country. And so, what brought that about was the fact there was going to be, I don't know how many thousands of people are standing in the street, but it was really to protect the thousands of people, and seeing that as as something to be extra cautious about. Whereas it's my understanding that when for construction purposes and other purposes a street is closed off, there's not that same presence. And in fact, the fact that we do have private, as state law allows, we have private streets in multiple parts of the city, and we have a gate. We don't have police cars lined up. We don't have a police presence. We don't have, all the different aspects we're discussing. We have a gate, and we accept that. So I'm not saying I'm not completely open to what this body feels is best. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to try to search for reasons not to do anything. So I want to make sure we are searching for reasons to do something and really make sure we're protecting our residents.
So, based on Mr. Solz's answer to that and the potential, again, legal issues that could arise in that situation, I would, to clarify this and come up with the best solution, I would support the outside counsel if you would like to make that motion, and we can then move forward with clarity on all these subjects rather than going around in circles of what might and might not, and that way we can get the best answer and best solution for the neighborhood.
Excellent. Yeah, as I mentioned, I did not support the motion to do nothing and defer it, but I absolutely am happy to make a motion to bring in a special
Made a
counsel.
motion, didn't you?
That's my motion.
Excellent. Second.
Motion to hire outside counsel to clarify the situation in Litchfield.
I prefer,
Second.
I have concerns with it actually that way. I have concerns with hiring, just to clarify, what I feel needs to be important is it needs to be to hire special counsel to find a solution. And I don't know what that solution is. That obviously the solution should not be clarified in the motion, but this is not just for extra clarification and extra couple pages. It's to really find a solution to really best supporting the residents of Roswell.
Well, obviously, that's what I meant. So to clarify that, to work on a solution for the Litchfield homeowners.
So the motion on the floor that's been seconded is to hire outside counsel to work with the city to find a solution for this problem. All in favor, please say aye, or raise your hands. It's unanimous, thank you. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and start the meeting. Olivia, you ready? Moving on to item number 2 under administration, consideration of a resolution to submit an application for federal fiscal year 2020 Historic Preservation Fund, HPF grant. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. This first item is for the Historic Preservation Fund grant. We've got a phase 1 that we did back in 2017, and this is an application for the federal fiscal year 2020 Historic Preservation Grant, the next phase. And I'll turn the information over, the item over to Julie Martin for the details.
Thank you.
Hello. We're requesting placement on the agenda for Monday, May the 27th, for consideration of application for the grant, as Gary and Michael have said. We did this grant before. It's a 60-40 match with 40 for the grant, 60 for the city. This year, the application maximum is $20,000. We're going to apply for that and hopefully get it. This is a survey for historic resources that are age 40 or over throughout the entire city. The last time this was done was 1977. That survey no longer meets current standards and it's fairly outdated. So we would like to remain in good standing with the state as a certified local government and pursue survey of the entire city. And to do so, we're seeking grant funding to help with that. Do you have any questions? This is the projected survey area.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. The floor is open for questions.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Tizer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Judy. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3, consideration to apply for a 2020 AmeriCorps grant from the Georgia Commission for Service and Volunteerism in the amount of $77,384. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. This grant application is also for another phase. We've been working very diligently with the AmeriCorps and with some of our local partners. Megan Boynton is our coordinator for the AmeriCorps grant. She's going to give you a little more information about what we're doing with it and what we're requesting, but this is for after-school programs, and it is another phase of an active grant.
Motion to approve. But I'd love to hear the details, and just want to say I appreciate all you do.
She's been preparing for days.
Yes, exactly.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having us to discuss this evening. As Michael had indicated, this is a request for consideration by the committee to approve effectively a continuation of an existing grant. As with the previous grant, this would be a situation where we would be requesting a certain portion of the monies from the Corporation for National and Community Service, which runs AmeriCorps, and then we would provide a match. And it is to support having AmeriCorps members in civilian national service serving together with our nonprofit partner, Star House Foundation, and they provide tutoring to students in after-school programs at several local elementary schools.
Thank you. There is a motion on the floor to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
I actually had a question.
Motion's been seconded. The floor is open for questions or comments.
Does Star House administer the program?
The City of Roswell facilitates the grant and helping to find the AmeriCorps members who will participate in the program. But in terms of actually running the after-school programs where the members serve as tutors, yes, they do.
The reason I ask is because the PTA is also very active in this type of activity, and it would be nice if there was a connection or coordination with the local PTAs in this effort. We, could get more bang for the buck, more power.
It's a good question, actually. So how many institutions will receive part of the grant? for the after-school program, how many, because I understand there's many offering after-school programs, so how many institutions will have access to this money?
We anticipate serving 3 elementary schools in the community. We currently have AmeriCorps members serving at 2 of those 3 elementary schools.
So
Which schools? Oh.
Yeah. This was my following question. Which schools?
Currently, they are serving at Mimosa Elementary and Esther Jackson Elementary, but we also seek to serve at Green Mill.
So it goes straight to the school or goes to a nonprofit who works on the school?
So the grant supports the AmeriCorps members themselves. It allows for a small living allowance, a modest living allowance for the members, and it allows for, in the request for the grant, some supplies for the beneficiaries, that's the students themselves.
So how many corps members do we have in the city of Roswell?
We currently have 5. They are our vanguard. They're the first 5 in North Fulton with this grant, and we'd like to see that number grow. We're requesting to support as many as 24.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Can you clarify the number in a second? We couldn't tell.
Motion was made by Councilmember Palermo and seconded by Councilmember Tizer. All in favor, please raise your hands. It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to finance, number 4, presentation of the fiscal year 2020 second quarter investment report. Mr. Luckett.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here this evening to present the second quarter investment report. As you may or may not know, this report is provided monthly. It's included in your council packet as an information item. We decided starting this month that we would present our financial reports to you on a quarterly basis just to make sure that we're providing that information and everyone is on the same page as to the condition of our finances. So this month we're beginning with our investment report. Next month we'll be presenting our quarterly budget report. So you'll see that next month at the February committee meeting. Before I jump into the investment report, I do want to just kind of give you a little bit of background about why we invest funds. The reason that the city invests funds is because, as you know, the timing of our revenues and expenses aren't always in sync. We take in revenues, the council allocates those revenues, but they may not be they may not need to be spent right away. So we hold on to funds until those projects are underway, until they're needed to be spent. So instead of leaving those funds in our bank account, we try to maximize the use of those funds while we have them until they're going to be used. And so that's kind of why we are involved in investing public funds. So really, when you look at what funds are being invested, basically you're talking about our reserve funds. So those are funds that are sitting idle. They could be capital project funds that have been allocated by the council. They've been allocated for a very specific purpose but have not yet been spent. Or these would be operating funds that go to support day-to-day operations, but again, they haven't been spent at this point. So that just gives you a little bit of background as to why we invest public funds. If you look on page 2, you'll see there in the middle, the mayor and council have adopted an investment policy for the city, and included in that investment policy are our investment objectives. And those are listed here on page 2 in order of priority. And you can see that our top priority when it comes to investments is safety. So our top priority is to make sure that we do not see any losses in the principal that is invested. Our second priority is compliance. So we have our local investment policy that governs what we can invest in, as well as state law, which lists very specifically what we are allowed to invest in. Our third investment objective is liquidity. Of course, we want to make sure that we have the cash on hand to support our day-to-day objectives. And fourth, income. So, the more interest income that we can bring into the city while we have those funds sitting idle, obviously that's less taxpayer dollars that have to be used to support the services and programs that we're funding during the year. So at the bottom of page 2, this gives you just a snapshot current status of our portfolio. You can see that as of the end of December, the effective interest rate of our portfolio was 161 basis points. And we benchmarked that against the 1-year treasury. And you can see that for December, the one-year Treasury was at 151 basis points. So we are exceeding currently the one-year Treasury. If you look at page 3, this just gives you a graphical representation of that same information, the graph at the top. The pie chart at the bottom then breaks out the different investment tools that we use and how that's the proportion that we invest in. So you can see that 42% of our investment portfolio is in Georgia Fund 1. This is a local government investment pool that the state authorizes all local governments to participate in, and most local governments do participate in it. Works a lot like a bank account. We can deposit funds, the state invests it for us, and we receive a greater interest rate on that, and we can access it very quickly. You can see that 26% of our portfolio is invested in federal agencies. These are federal government agencies that issue debt. So you can see because it's the federal government, these are very conservative, very safe investments for the city to participate in. 15% of our cash is in our bank deposits, 14% are in CDs, and 3% are in municipal bonds. If you take a look at page 4, the table at the top there kind of splits out all of the investment types that we use and the actual dollar amounts that exist within those types. So total cash on hand as of the end of December was $121 million. That is on the high side for us, and there's really 2 primary reasons for that. One is T-Splast. So we've been collecting T-Splast revenues for the last couple of years, but those expenses are just now starting to ramp up. So we are sitting on quite a large amount of T-Splast proceeds that will be spent over the next coming years. Also, this is the time of year that we take in all of our property tax revenues. And so, $26 million basically coming in November and December, that will be spent, as we go out through the rest of the fiscal year. The bar chart at the bottom just again shows you our total investments by type across the various months. The black line shows you kind of where we were last year, and you can see the primary reason for the growth above that black line is because of our T-Splash revenues that are accumulating. On page 5, this gives you the table at the top, shows you our liquidity and our average length of maturity. So you can see across our portfolio, our average length of maturity is just over a year. Most of that's because most of our funds are invested in Georgia Fund 1 and also in our bank deposits. So those are easily, very liquid and easily accessible. The others range from 1 to 3 years. And then at the bottom of that page, page 5, this shows you a maturity schedule. So you can see most of our funds, like I said, are in those investments that are accessible within a day. So those are maturing in less than a year. And then everything else you can see stretches from 1 to 5 years. The rest of the report is just a detailed listing of all the investments that we currently own. So the first section are all the various CDs that we see. Then it gets into the agency bonds, and then it shows you our bank deposits in Georgia Fund 1. Just to give you an idea of the revenue source this produces for the city. These are funds that the council has allocated for projects and for programs throughout the year, but they just haven't been spent yet. So at FY 2019, the city brought in about $1.5 million in investment income. So that's, again, money that can be spent on programs and services offered by the city. So, any questions?
On page 5 on the top.
Yes.
So average length of maturity 3.07 years, 18,086,000. So are those reserves, or what is this money there? And if it's reserved for emergency, how easy is to access this 18,086,000?
They could be our reserves. These also would include T-Splast projects that are, those dollars won't be spent, at least not all of them will be spent in the next couple of years. So that's the job that we have, is to, analyze our needs and expenses and to make sure that we're allocating these investments in a way that they come available when they're needed. So I can't say, I mean, we didn't take this dollar amount and invest it here, so you can't really say that, but yes.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? It's just discussion.
Yes.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, presentation of fiscal year 2020 second quarter budget initiative progress report. Ms. Hora.
Good evening, council members. So this is the second report that the finance department is presenting to you all today, the budget initiative progress report. And so this is the second quarter report, and this report basically gives you a status of all of the FY 2020 approved initiatives, and it also includes any FY 19 initiatives that have carried forward that were not completed in 19. So the first slide is, we see here is the administration department. So they had a total of 11 initiatives. 3 of them have been completed or substantially completed. 7 are progressing as planned, and 1 is delayed. So they've added 2 more to their list of completed projects since the first quarter budget initiative. And this is the list of projects that they have, and the status is provided. Moving on to community development, they had...
Can I just, is the second quarter ending 12/31/19?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The second department here you see is the community development department. They had a total of 7 initiatives. Of those, 3 have been completed or substantially completed, and substantially completed basically means anything greater than 90%. And there are 4 progressing as planned, and community development added 1 to their list of completed projects in the second quarter. And these are the list of all of their projects and the status. And then for public works, we had a total of 12 initiatives. 4 of them completed or substantially completed, 7 progressing as planned, and 1 delayed. And Public Works 2 added 1 project to their list of completed or substantially completed in the second quarter as compared to the first quarter. And their projects or initiatives are divided by each of the funds. So you see here the projects for the solid waste fund with the status, and then the stormwater fund, the water fund projects here, and then of course the fleet fund. And then moving on to the fire department, they had a total of 9 initiatives, 7 of them progressing as planned, and 2 that are delayed. And this is the list of projects with the status provided. And then for the police department, there were a total of 8 initiatives, 4 completed or substantially completed, and 4 progressing as planned. And they added 1 to their list of completed or substantially completed as compared to the first quarter. This is the list of all of their projects here with the status provided. And then for recreation and parks, we had a total of 12 initiatives, 1 that has been completed and 11 progressing as planned, and that 1 has been added now in the second quarter as compared to the first quarter. And this is the list of their projects with the status provided. And then our transportation department, there were a total of 17 initiatives, 10 of them progressing as planned and 7 delayed. And that's their list of projects with the status provided. That is all I have. Any questions, I'd happy to answer.
Floor is open.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Harpreet. Moving on to Recreation and Parks, item number 6, consideration of approval of the Culture Arts Center public art policies. Mr. Leatherman.
Thank you. Becky's bringing up our presentation, and apologize if I look down and up in other directions here tonight. Just a point of clarification, and it was discussed earlier, just a couple of questions that I had from Mayor and Council, that what we're proposing tonight, while it falls under the Recreation and Parks section, because I'm the lead department in putting the policies together, the intent is that these are citywide policies that all departments would be able to access and use. The reason behind why I'm kind of representing and helping to draft the policies is we tend to utilize art policies and have the need for these policies more often than other departments. But in talking with Public Works and Transportation and others, there is the potential for art projects to fall in our right-of-ways and fall in our other facilities. And so while we're looking at these policies from a citywide perspective, I'm presenting them tonight. There is also that applicability across all departments. And so just keep that in mind as you go through, and as you have any questions, we can field those as we go. There's two parts of the documentation, and if you remember from the work session, we really tried to break out the policies into two parts. One is the public art policy on public property, and one is how do we tackle donations of public art that would potentially be gifted to the city. Best example on the donation side is when we have our art around projects, there's the potential for people to want to purchase those, and we've had that done in the past. And we don't right now have a policy for how we would accept that donation as a city, and so this policy tackles that question. There could be other instances where that happens within the community where somebody would want to donate something, and this policy, as it's currently drafted, would help us just give us the process for how we go about fielding those types of questions and reviewing that donation request. So first, just how the art policy itself is structured. Those are the different sections, and we'll talk about some of those main sections, highlighting our relationship with the Arts Fund. And you'll see that coming up here shortly, as the Arts Fund is our designated art agency, and so they have a role within the city policies for how we go about fielding both donation requests as well as the installation of public art on public property. And just from an authority perspective, and you'll see this in the flow chart, this is what we've clarified within the policy to make sure that it's clear of where mayor and council's approval authority is with different types of projects. We have short-term projects and we have long-term projects, as well as temporary art projects, and those are defined within the policy. In a couple of slides after I get through the authority section, you'll see how that authority plays out in the actual review and approval process. But before I go on, is there any questions about how we've laid that out in the policy? As it relates to the department, here's the responsibilities of who the department lead would be, and I'll just use our park facilities as an example, that if somebody wanted to install a public art project, and we'll use art around as the example since we're familiar with it, I would be considered the department lead, and we would coordinate with the designated art agency on that project and help bring it through the policy. This isn't something where if somebody wants to donate or do a public art project within the city that we just kind of send them out with the policy and say good luck. We really want to foster that relationship through the departments who are eventually responsible for either the installation or the maintenance of that project. The responsibilities of the designated art agency, and what you'll see is that we've defined what those responsibilities are, but we have not defined the process in which they follow. That is up to the designated art agency to set their procedures outside of the policy, which they have most of these already in place, but we wanted to define what their responsibilities were in the process so that there was in the policy so that there was clarity on all parties. And so those are the outline of the major responsibilities with the designated art agency. And then commissions, if applicable. This would be, for example, the Recreation Commission or the Historic Preservation Commission. In certain areas, we have to recognize that this body has delegated certain authority to our commissions, and so we need to insert them into the process when and where applicable. So as you look at all of those authorities, this is the process for approval for long-term projects, and long-terms are defined in the policy, and how essentially it would work is that you would have a conceptual project development, somebody thinks of an idea, that would then get presented to mayor and council. Remember, we're talking about the process, so if I wanted to fund something out of my budget, I would do that in step 2 and present that project proposal to mayor and council through the budget process in a conceptual level, so that we know that we have permission to use the budget, we've got authority, and then we would move through to step 3, 4, and 5. Once we had those budget allocations in place, We would move to step 3, which is engaging with our designated art agency with the selection panel. Again, that process is defined in their procedures. And then we would have a formation of the recommendations by the selection panel. And then 5, 6, and 7 are the presentation to council, design, finalization, and the installation of the project. And so going back to the authority of mayor and council, you have a couple of steps where that authority enters into the process. I'll stop there if there's any questions. Okay. Temporary art is dealt with a little bit different. This is short-term projects. Things that potentially are going to be in a park or a facility for a relatively short period of time, whether it's a pop-up art installation or something else. Again, we would have a conceptual development. Those would be presented to the designated art agency as well as relevant departments. There would be a selection panel. We would form the selection panel recommendation, and then we would present those to the commissions or to council if where applicable. And in this case, let's say it's a park for installation, that would get presented to the Recreation Commission as opposed to the council, because you've delegated the authority of policy and operating those park facilities under that Recreation Commission. Frankly, this is also in consideration of the workload associated with what could potentially come with short-term projects. And so in looking at how this body has delegated certain authority, we felt it was appropriate in temporary art installations to tackle that approval in this process.
Does the policy really define temporary?
It does, yeah. We spent quite a bit of time with our designated art agency and staff, and you'll find that in the definition section, it's page 63 of your packet, and long-term is defined, and temporary art means any art proposed to be installed for less than 12 months. That's how it's defined in the policy.
I know there has been some discussion and request by the Arts Fund to change the definition for temporary art to be less than 24 months, just in the event that art around the sculpture tour was to be done on a longer cycle. So that's just a point for discussion and revision.
Yeah, and kind of depending on where this council feels we're at with the formation of the policies, if we want to move them forward for consideration at your council meeting, you could give us those types of directions. We could make those amendments and then bring those amendments forward. It really just depends on, from your perspective, how well we've progressed in formation of appropriate policy for your consideration.
So again, the temporary will be, what is the time frame?
It's currently less than 12 months is how it's defined. And
okay.
What I just heard is that we could take that potentially as a definition up to 24 months.
I have some hesitation with 24 months. I think 12 months certainly makes sense, but when we're talking 2 years, I'd want to dive into really looking at the differences between the two processes and the steps before.
Sure. Yeah, and as an alternative, if it's specific to the art around, you could just designate art around as a temporary art installation and keep the 12 months. And that gives the latitude for that project specifically within the definitions. As an alternative that you could consider. Then you could just define temporary art means anything for less than 12 months and the temporary art program or the art around program. Moving on to the donation policy, you'll see some similar kind of just setup that we've put, the role of the sponsor and co-sponsor, and I'll highlight that here in a moment. Because there's some nuance in that space. The authority of the mayor and council, and this is the role that I want to make sure that this body is aware of that we've placed in the policy, is what we've placed is essentially that the mayor and council may serve as a sponsor for a donation for a project for the purpose of this, as well as a department. So if somebody were to approach mayor or mayor and council as a body, you could then bring that forward as a sponsoring department within the policy, because there are some times where mayor and council is approached directly as opposed to a department head for a donation request. And so we wanted to make sure that that authority was captured within this space. And so I don't know that that exists anywhere else in policy, and so we wanted to make sure that that you're all aware that that is here in the policy. The responsibilities of the sponsors and co-sponsors, and again, this is somebody who is coming to the city and looking to make a permanent donation of art on property. How do they go about a process for that being considered? And the artwork must have a city sponsor or co-sponsor who's then going to be working with the designated art agency to prepare the proposal. And then in line with the donation process, we will gather and review recommendations for final approval. And again, in conjunction with your designated art agency, which their role is defined within their MOU. The responsibilities of the designated art agency, that's the partnership piece, the formation of selection panel, the project tracking, criteria for Art Week, plan design, safety reviews, oversee the suitability to ensure reasonable diversity of artwork types. Commissions, if applicable, they're going to review and submit recommendations to the mayor and to the city council prior to final approval. This would be in the case of a donation being made in a park facility, would take that recommendation or provide that recommendation from the Recreation Commission to mayor and council to accept that donation or potentially not accept the donation. And then this would be the process similar to what you saw in kind of the formation of art. In the donation process, we would have designated art agency. They would review with the relevant department lead, a selection panel that would move forward with the designated art agency, the department lead, presentation to commissions, presentation to council, and then upon final agreement, we would accept that art and then installation. Staff recommendations are to move the policies forward for adoption. Of course, we can take additional comments. If there's more work that we need to do, we can also take those comments. It's at your leisure.
I have a question, and maybe this is addressed somewhere else. I'm new, so I don't know where everything is housed. As far as insurance and liability for the art, is that addressed in here, or is that somewhere else in another document somewhere?
So there are, thank you, there are some insurance and liability requirements with certain projects. Similar to Art Around, I'm looking at Becky, we have some insurance requirements associated with that because it is, there are pieces that are essentially on loan. When it comes to the donation of art, that becomes city property. And so then that would then be covered as part of city property because it is then donated and considered an asset of the city. I'd have to double check the MOU as it relates to our designated art agency and the art fund, but generally in our MOUs we have insurance requirements. To exactly what that stands for and what it covers, I don't know.
And who's responsible for the cost of the insurance, the city or?
With the Art Around program?
Yes.
I believe the insurance is on the artist and the liability is on the artist. For temporary art, it's for Art Around. If it was a permanent piece of art, then it would be the city's liability and insurance at that point.
Sounds like our council has a comment on that.
And our risk manager takes all city-owned property and submits that to the insurance company, and they make an assessment.
Thank you.
Excuse me, so there's been, are we on here? Yeah. There's been a significant amount of work done on this thing. I know that there's been a lot of hands in it trying to get to this point. I'd encourage my, I'd move this forward. I'd encourage my colleagues to read the details of it. If you have any changes or suggestions, get them to Director Leatherman between now and when it appears on a council meeting. Chances are they've thought through it and may be able to give you an answer in advance as to what's happening. So if there's no other questions, I'd move to move this forward.
Motion approved by
Second.
Councilman Tizer, second by Councilmember Judy. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jeff. Moving on to other items, item number 7, consideration of starting the transcription of council and committee meetings by State of Georgia certified stenographer, court reporter for all meetings of the mayor and city council and committee, council committees. Councilmember Judy.
So, not to beat a dead horse, because we spent way too much time on this last evening, I believe it's in staff's hands now to come back with the means of transcribing the minutes, the transcription of the meetings, and so I think we probably covered everything last night that needed to be covered. So unless there's any other conversation, I, obviously think we should have done it in committee, but we took care of it last evening in a long way, and I'm good, so.
Floor is open.
I agree with Councilman Judy. I just want to make sure it's clear with staff. Two key points, obviously, knowing that starting in the first council meeting 2 weeks from last night would be the first one that would end up being transcribed. And then secondly, that despite the Councilman Judy's email in this committee packet, that it would not be a certified court stenographer.
I would add that I didn't, spoke with Gary earlier this morning. I would encourage staff to thoroughly look at outside sources to do this for us for a number of reasons. The biggest reason is if we have two people here doing it, they can do 2 meetings at a time. If you have an outside service that has 30 employees, they've got a lot more bandwidth to get these things done. So I think it's interesting to take a look at that. I know in the past we've looked at electronic versions of transcription. I don't know if that's changed in its accuracy over the last few months, but certainly taking a look at both of those options. And again, I don't want to drag this on. I just wanted to make that statement.
And I agree with Councilman Tizer. Since we do have official short minutes that are meeting the legal requirements, this is a service for the citizens, and I think we should look at electronic ways of doing it.
Floor is open.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think ultimately I've had some experience in doing some things like this with, podcasts and recorded meetings, and I think ultimately possibly look at a combination of the two, with outsourcing it for basic transcripts and then having someone who knows the people, knows the material, the places, can go back and edit it so that it's easier to follow.
So actually, there is one detail I do want to bring up to this committee. I did not bring it up last night, given that it was a very long discussion. I knew we'd have some time in committee. So obviously, from the beginning, I've been a strong advocate, making sure we have transcribed minutes, detailed written minutes. But what I do want to clarify is personally, I felt in an effort to limit the costs and limit the time, my personal belief is it should be any item where there's a vote. And so I know we had discussed that at committee a year or so ago. If this council prefers to really have everything being transcribed, including the discussions, the photos, the different aspects beforehand, I'm absolutely completely fine with that. It's not a major issue for me. It's just I do remember back when we were providing the detailed written minutes, there was a number of conversations and a number of things written, just really in the ceremonial type aspects, whereas in my focus is making sure that anything this body is voting on is absolutely written. So just want to share that. If anybody agrees for cost savings, I think we should have staff take that into account. If others feel that it's really important that even the non-vote items at the beginning of the meeting are all transcribed, then obviously it's not a big item for me.
For me, I think that's a thing staff can bring back to us once they figure out what means it's being done, the difference in the cost, because it might not be any difference. And if there's no difference, and just, let's go ahead and get the whole thing. So for me, I'm open to that. Should it save some money?
Yeah, but then you have the open mic
Well,
that you don't have a vote in there.
Touche. So what I was referring to, for my personal beliefs and my opinion, what I was referring to is actual regularly scheduled council meetings, the second and fourth meetings. Anytime where there's the actual votes, it being just the votes, I do think open mic night is different, and I think open mic night, even though there's no vote, should be transcribed. But for all the normal meetings that we have that's not open mic night, I personally felt when reading through all the transcriptions of just the earlier chatter, I just didn't feel that was crucial the way it was crucial when there was a vote or open mic night.
All right. Thank you. While we go to the next agenda, we need to take like a 1-minute break.
And so
Yes, sir.
I have a question for you while they're switching it. So as I mentioned in the email, I want to request this body adds one topic. And the reason being, so I saw your response, and I apologize, I didn't have a chance to respond back. So with it, what's important to me is three things. One, there's new information, given the fact that we got GDOT's letter back, so I consider that new information, which is why it's important to me that if I'm going to be signing something, that I've had a chance to ask my questions to staff, and when I ask them, I want to be able to have residents there ask them as well. And the fact that there were these residents wanting to meet that weren't able to, that's important to me. But then lastly, I felt like the email, I was overly in agreement in the sense of all I care about right now is just getting my meeting set up ASAP. But the one area where you disagreed was regarding unknown attendees. So basically, I don't know if I would have 3 attendees joining or 10 or 12, and I don't know what the names will be. It's just I want to have it be open where I have an hour conversation with RDOT where I can get questions answered prior to my decision to sign a form. So that was kind of my response to your email.
Councilmember Palermo, I'd suggest you have that conversation with the mayor. She's not here right now, but as far as setting up things like meetings and work sessions and calling us together, she's the one who does that, and I'd like you to discuss it with her.
But I want to clarify. It's really up to staff if they prefer a public work session, or if it's just this is a normal meeting.
It's fine. However you want to handle it, just coordinate with the mayor, please.
So I guess my concern.
Or with the city administrator, your
Do you want
choice.
to add an item?
I want to add this item because I want to.
The mayor's not here. I don't want to add an item without the mayor
Then
present.
you should vote against this item being added. But I think it's absolutely crucial that I have the ability to, prior to if I'm being asked to sign a letter, I have an hour with staff to do it, and the risk that does not happen just as these residents were denied in the past. That's too big of a risk for me because there's no public meeting between now and when this letter is due. So that's my issue.
I'm so sorry. Can you please clearly state what the addendum is to the meeting, as in what are you requesting for the vote to be?
Sure. So setting up a meeting with a council member and RDOT and residents to really walk through any questions regarding the Gateway project along with GDOT's letter back.
Do you want us to have an open forum?
I'm fine with that. The problem is the urgency. It's my understanding we have to get this letter back to GDOT, I believe, in the next week or so. So my issue is if we don't get it set up tonight, there's the risk this does not happen in the next week or two. That's where I see the risk. If there's assurances, and basically the reason I want to have this item added is because I need assurances that I'm going to get that hour with residents.
Just assure each other you're going to have a meeting. Let's get on with it. I've got a hard stop, so I won't be here very much longer.
Okay.
There are items of business to conduct for our citizens.
I think that's the most important aspect, to know that there were residents that were denied a meeting, to say that's not relevant business.
Schedule the meeting. I'm not arguing whether you should have the meeting or not.
So
if the man says he'll do a meeting with you, if the
Gary,
mayor doesn't need to be involved, then just do it.
Gary, is Mohammed going to have this meeting with me and the residents?
Yeah, we'll set a meeting.
Okay. Then I'm not going to amend it.
No addendum. What we're setting. I understand the letter. I haven't seen it.
I just heard about it today.
Lydia,
That's why this became so urgent today. So yeah, that was why there was an urgent email from me, because I had just found out.
So Christine, while we can take a little break in between the agendas because we've got to flip into the system, so it just takes like a minute or two.
Okay.
So we just have to vamp.
I just saw the email now. It came at 3 o'clock. I was driving.
Yeah, I found out this afternoon that we need to get our response to
Have you
GDOT.
seen the letter?
The letter that we're requested all to sign, I briefly saw it. You seen it?
It was handed to me at 4 o'clock Park yesterday.
You got it before me, yeah, I saw it about 2:30, and that's where I said I need a meeting with Mohammed, and I want residents in there with me for an hour.
Well, I requested not to sign it. I requested not to sign it because I had some questions. Because I thought you and I were going to set up a walking tour with Mohammed.
Ready, Olivia? 10 seconds, okay.
I mean, with advance notice, I can do anything on my schedule. I mean, I just need like a couple days or a day.
Okay, we're going to move on to the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for Tuesday, January 14, 2020. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for December 10th, 2019. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Approved by Councilmember Tizer, seconded by Councilmember Palermo. All in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous, thank you. No items for public safety, police, public safety, fire. We're moving on to public works. Item number 3, consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with GS Construction Inc. for design and construction services for the Clara Drive water line replacement project in the amount of $122,702.50. Mr. Skulski.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a pretty straightforward water line replacement. We bid it competitively because it has CDBG grant money. This was originally leftover money from a prior fiscal year, which we were able to repurpose to a water line improvement on Clara Drive. It'll be about 860 feet, and most of it is going to be new 8-inch ductile iron pipe. So we were pleased that we were able to get a number of bids. There was a fair spread in the bids. That's unfortunate, but we did confirm the bids with the low bidder and check their references and would like to move forward with this. I'll be happy to answer any questions. It's replacing some galvanized steel and asbestos cement concrete pipe.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Councilmember Palermo. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Tizer. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you, unanimous. Item number 4, consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to award a contract to Chatfield Contracting Inc., standby contractor for the Azalea Drive pipe lining project in the amount of $145,165. Mr. Skulski.
Thank you. So this is lining several old corrugated metal pipe culverts, and you can see their rough location in our GIS maps and their condition. They're not imminently failing, but these are the kind of things that when they go quickly, and we discover them as part of our inspection of all culverts under public roads, which is going on right now. And these moved to the top of the list because of some of the damage to some of the segments, and we're doing all 3 at this point. They were quoted by several of our standby contractors, and we're awarding to Chatfield, or recommending award to Chatfield Contractor. They were the lowest of the lining quotes that we got. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Floor is open.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Councilmember Judy.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you for being the lone wolf there, buddy. I look back at